When We Disagree is a show about arguments, how we have them, why we have them, and their impact on our relationships and ourselves. Everyone agrees with me, they just won't admit it. Any reasonable person would see it my way. I'm just saying what we're all thinking. This tendency to overestimate how much others share our beliefs, values, and behaviors is called the false consensus effect, and it makes us terrible at predicting and understanding disagreement. Ross, Green, and House, three researchers, demonstrated this in 1977 by asking students whether they walk around campus wearing a sandwich board saying "Eat at Joe's." Those who agreed estimated 62% of others would as well. Those who refused estimated only 33% would agree. We constantly project our own choices onto others, creating imaginary majorities that support our positions. This bias wreaks havoc in relationships. Your partner assumes that you share their feelings about how often to visit their family, how often to clean the house, or what constitutes reasonable spending. When you disagree, they're genuinely shocked, and surely everybody thinks a $500 golf club is reasonable if you use it regularly. These aren't just differences of opinions, they're failures of imagination about how differently others see the world. In friend groups, this false consensus creates rifts. You assume everyone finds that one friend as annoying as you do, only to discover that you're fairly alone in your irritation. Or you think everyone's comfortable with casual teasing until somebody finally explodes about their boundaries being violated and their feelings being hurt. We mistake our personal normal for a universal normal, and then we feel betrayed when others reveal their different standards. Workplaces can amplify this false consensus. Managers assume employees share their enthusiasm for weekend team building operations, or employees assume that everyone hates the open office plan as much as they do. The phrase, "as we all know," often precedes something that only the speaker knows. Breaking false consensus requires deliberate perspective taking. Before assuming agreement, explicitly check. Ask, what might someone with different experiences think? And seek out disagreement not to argue, but to understand. When someone's position seems bizarre, consider what their assumed consensus might be. And often, we're not disagreeing about conclusions, but about what everyone knows, allegedly, to be true. I'm Michael Lee, Professor of Communication and Director of the Civility Initiative at the College of Charleston. Today's guest on When We Disagree is Joseph Uscinski. Joe is one of the world's leading researchers on the relationship between conspiracy theories and media. He's a professor of political science at the University of Miami, and he is the author of American Conspiracy Theories, among many other publications. Joe, tell us an argument story.
So I've been in an ongoing argument, perhaps with most of the world, about the levels of conspiracy theory beliefs out there. So most people say that conspiracy theory beliefs are on the rise. The people are believing more and more conspiracy theories every day, and we're about to fall off the conspiracy theory cliff. And my view has always been, well, do you have any evidence for that? At which point I usually get crickets. So a couple of years ago, I decided to go back and just start polling lots of conspiracy theories over and over again to see if indeed the levels were going up over time and that people were believing more and more conspiracy theories. And I found that they just weren't. And even making all of this data and evidence available to lots of people, particularly journalists, they don't want to believe me. So it's an argument that I have almost every time I have a conversation with a journalist, which is usually around once or twice a week.
Describe your proof, if you would, please. How do you go back and show numerically, statistically, whether or not conspiracy theories are on the rise? Anecdotally, I'm sure these journalists and the rest of the world are looking around them and saying, well, look, people are having these beliefs about the Earth's roundness or this, that, and the other. And it seems anecdotally like, of course, they're more prominent.
Because what seemed to be happening was that you would have a journalist find out about somebody believes the Earth is flat.
Right.
Or they might see a singular poll that says X amount of people believe Y conspiracy theory. And I say, aha, everyone's fallen off the conspiracy theory cliff. this is the golden age of conspiracy theories. And the problem with that sort of data is that it doesn't show you a trajectory over time, right? The levels could have been lower in the past, they could have been higher in the past. We could be the least conspiratorial people based on the evidence that they tend to bring. So what I did is I went back to the archives of survey research and found lots of polls that had been done in decades prior, and decided to follow up and repoll all of those conspiracy theories the exact same way, whether it was decades after the fact or years or whatever, to see if they were, going up or going down. And if the journalists were all correct that we're truly in the golden age of conspiracy theories, they should all have gone up through the roof. But they didn't. Very few went up. Most went down or stayed the same. And the issue then is that they should stop saying it.
So give us some examples here. So you've gone back and done surveys and also done comparative historical work about conspiracy theories that predate the rise of the internet. So give us a few examples. So JFK conspiracy theory, moon landing conspiracy theory, and others. What happens to the prominence of those beliefs or the popularity of those beliefs before and after the rise of the internet, before and after the rise of social media?
So with JFK, it's a great example. So only a few months after the president was assassinated, you had 50% of Americans believing it was a conspiracy rather than a lone gunman. By the mid 1970s, it was 80%. And it's only come down back to around 50% in the internet and social media era. So that's one conspiracy theory. So we shouldn't generalize beyond it to everything, but it does tell us that one, you don't need the internet or social media or even Donald Trump to have a lot of people believe a conspiracy theory. Because I've been polling for more than a decade on dozens and dozens of conspiracy theories. I don't get anything close to 80% ever.
Uh-huh.
So this was able to happen decades ago. And it also shows us that just because we have an internet and social media doesn't mean that every conspiracy theory is going to spread everywhere and convince everyone.
Let's talk about, well, let's set up like a mini mock debate here. I'll play the rest of the world, these journalists, and you play Joe. So conspiracy theories are on the rise. Here's why. One, intensity of belief is increasing. Two, it seems anecdotally like just sheer numbers from the amount of people who are having discussions or have some casual knowledge about conspiratorial thinking as an option to interpret the world is increasing. Three, variety because of the internet, Reddit, etc., allows us to access not just stuff about Bigfoot, but the Denver airport and all sorts of really peculiar ones. Birds aren't real. Are they real? Are they not? All the way to the classics of this and that assassination and the moon landing and more. And then finally, prominence. The people who are in real positions of power, as opposed to eons past, have access to and are embracing conspiratorial thinking in a way that doesn't seem analogous to the recent or distant American past. How do you respond to any or all of those?
Well, let me take each of those. Well, maybe they are more intense. I don't find any evidence of it. So if you want to claim that, you should bring that evidence. And that's typically what happens when I talk to a journalist is I'll tell them the levels don't seem to be rising, and they'll say, well, they're more intense. So it's just sort of a get out of jail free card. I can never be wrong. I'll just change my argument.
It's not falsifiable.
Yeah. And then your second thing was you have anecdotes about things. Well, great.
Yeah.
Thanks for your anecdotes. The third one was the variety. I don't know if there's more or less variety in conspiracy theories nowadays than in the past. And this gets to your next point about Reddit. The neat thing about the internet is that everything stays there. You can see it. Whereas if you and I shared conspiracy theories at the water cooler, they're gone with the wind, right? There's no way to observe that. But the neat thing about social media is it allows you not only to have the conversation, but for third parties to observe that conversation took place, right? so I think what's happening is that we are confusing the ability to see the conversation um, with the idea that the beliefs are on the rise, or that everyone seeing this tweet or Reddit post is somehow being persuaded by it. And those are very different things, right? Like an example that I used to use a lot was, if you Google duck confit recipe, you will get
Uh-huh.
27 million duck confit recipes. No one's going home to cook duck confit tonight, right?
Right.
And that's sort of the point. Just because you can see it being there doesn't mean anyone's looking at it or paying attention. And here's the thing, is that we are often generalizing from a handful of prominent viral conspiracy theories, which are themselves anecdotes. They are not representative of your normal conspiracy theory. You can go put a bunch of conspiracy theories on your page tomorrow, and you'll probably get very few likes, very few shares. I mean, if I do it, I'll probably get a lot of shares because people will say he's lost his mind. Finally, he's cracked. But your average person does it, no one's going to care,
Yeah.
and no one's going to look at it, and no one's going to share it, and that's your average conspiracy theory post. So
Yeah.
we're sort of we're doing what scientists call selecting on the dependent variable. Is we're finding the case that matches what we want it to be. We're finding the one that went viral. We're finding the one that's influential. We're finding the one that's convinced everybody, and then saying, "Aha, this one I selectively picked out
Hmm.
proves my case." Well, sure, because you picked out the one that proves your case. But now get a random sample or pick out a whole bunch of them, and you will find that most don't fit the argument.
One of the arguments I raised is actually connected back to your point about influence just now, but one of the previous arguments I raised when I was role playing the rest of the world fighting you on this issue is prominence of belief in terms of people in positions of power who seem to be operating from conspiratorial sets of ideas as being anecdotally, again, different from this past. How do you respond?
So I agree with that. I don't know if there's systematic data to show it, but I think at this point we kind of know that there are certain politicians that are engaging in the conspiratorial rhetoric in a way that we haven't seen in our lifetimes, right? From prominent politicians. I
Hmm.
mean, we have had politicians in the past who have engaged in a conspiracy theory here or there. Like Hillary Clinton said she was the victim of a vast right-wing conspiracy, and Obama opened up his second or his reelection campaign for a second term, saying that secretive oil billionaires were out to get him. So it happens, but no one does it with as much as Trump does, as far as I can tell. So that's true, but that's very different than saying everyone believes them more. Those are very different arguments
Those
to
are different
say.
claims. Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that it raises too when you bring up Trump or you bring up anybody else, but also the Clintons, Obama, et cetera, is it seems to me like this debate is obviously a debate over the now, who believes what and what causes them to believe what. Are they being exposed to more conspiratorial ideas via the wild west of the internet, and therefore they believe more and it's having a negative impact on our world? It seems to me that there's two issues at play. One of those issues is a disagreement about the hallowed age of the fact, right? That there is some idea that you seem to be pushing back on, and I might be putting words in your mouth here, so we can debate that out. But at least what I'm hearing largely is there was a popular perception that Americans used to believe in a consistent set of realities that they have deviated from because of the internet, and that you're saying no, Americans have been really conspiratorial before and after the internet.
Well, yeah, there's no evidence of this. I hear it all the time. Like, I remember when everyone agreed on the facts. That never happened. And I think throughout history, probably everybody always said, I remember a time in the past when people believed in the facts, but it was always in the past.
Right.
There's no evidence to show that that's the case. And if anything, we all have access to the world's library in our pocket now. If we want to be right, we can be. And it's not like the internet is just full of false information. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
have all the world's true information available at your fingertips. But if people don't want to access it, that's up to them. But I don't I don't see any reason to believe that people are more or less willing to want to believe true things now than in the past. We're just paying more attention
That's right. Well, and
now
the
than we have.
and the similar idea too is in terms of the way that we historically think about the American public and what motivates it. And so, whether it's the hallowed age of the fact, this like sepia toned history that we're whitewashing when we think about our descent into conspiratorial thinking, but also the idea that Americans used to be motivated by pure reason and they weren't influenced in any case by conspiracy theories. But there's lots of great work on the rise of enslavement in the United States, even conspiracies around the Revolution, conspiracies around the Constitutional Convention, and certainly the advent of the Civil War and both world wars in the 20th century, certainly segregation as well. There's lots of conspiratorial thinking about what this and that group of people will and won't do. And my God, around communism and the spread of communism in the United States. And so these all seem to be helping your point, I think, that Americans.
I remember, like
go
when
ahead.
people often ask me, they'll ask me a juiced question. They'll say,
Yeah.
"How did things become as bad as they are now?" And I say, "Well, um, by bad as they are now, do you mean worse than when we were burning witches? Worse than during the Red Scare?" So people seem to have short memories, or that they just never took a history class. So this stuff has always been around. Yes, it's true that we have the major part of one of our two parties being controlled by conspiracy-minded people who want to build a coalition of conspiracy-minded people. So that's bad, and I share those concerns. But the arguments that I get in with journalists tend to be that they are blaming the public for becoming a bunch of conspiracy kooks just on their own. People have descended, and probably because of the internet. Or conspiracy theories are like sentient agents who do what they want to do and they spread how they want to spread, and the theories themselves convince people and they make people do things. And it's all to get around the idea that people are adopting these beliefs sometimes because they want to or because of who they are. And to get around the idea that we have politicians who are engaging in conspiracy theories. And a lot of journalists don't want to hit that nail right on its head. They'd rather dance around it. Sometimes I understand why. Like if you're NPR, you don't want to go attacking the government right now because Doge will be coming for you. So it's easier to blame conspiracy theories than it is to blame the ruling party.
I'm wondering about the relationship between, and take parties out of it for a second, but the algorithmic popularity of conspiratorial thinking, just in terms of content, right? If I wanted to create, an ideally viral YouTube video about a historically complicated subject, right? And I'm like, okay, let's describe the science of the moon landing amidst the context of a competitive Cold War space race. I think I could put a decently dramatic case together for what was going on there, but it's going to be complicated. There's going to be backs and there's going to be forths. It's not a simple narrative, but a case that the moon landing was fixed, a case that was all filmed in some studio in Burbank, seems to me to be more simpler, more salacious, can simplify a complicated world. And so I guess the case for them being agents in and of themselves, selling themselves, builds from that.
Well, I mean, what's simple is a subjective, viewpoint. What makes sense is a subjective viewpoint, right? So when this is why I don't argue about conspiracy theories with people, because unless they're an expert on the topic of which they're talking about and have the backing of other experts and have data and evidence to back up what they're saying, there's really no point. So you got two guys in this conversation right now. I don't want to say how old you are, but
I'm 46.
Yeah, so I'm older than you. I wasn't even alive during the moon landing. So we could sit here and navel gaze about,
Sure.
oh, how did it happen? But we weren't alive. We don't know any of the people involved, is my guess.
I'm not an expert.
We don't have any special expertise in moon landings or space travel or anything like that. So why are we even talking about it, right? And that's how a lot of this goes. Like I'll get in taxis sometimes or Ubers, and I make the mistake of telling the drivers what I do for a living, and then like, oh, I'm going to tell you about what the CIA is up to.
Oh,
And
I
it's
bet.
like, how is a taxi driver going to tell me about what the CIA is up to? And it's just something they found on the internet somewhere. So this is like folklore.
Yeah.
It's myth. It's urban myths, rumors, whatever, and taking the form of conspiracy theories. But to me, it's like if you're at a baseball game and there's a play at home plate, who do you want to ask about what happens at home plate? The home plate umpire or some guy out in the stands who's drunk
Right.
and is rooting for one team or the other,
Well,
right?
what a forced choice.
And that's what these conversations become, is just people who don't know anything about what they're talking about, arguing with a bunch of anecdotes that may or may not even be true.
The final thing I wanted to cover with you, which is a relevant sub-debate that seems to be happening alongside this one about the current status of beliefs and media and conspiracy relationships. The first big one that's obviously beneath this is, do we have some rosy view of the historical past where there was a kind of purely rational belief set and that we've deviated from? And the second one is, what is the relationship between people's exposure to media and their subsequent beliefs? In other words, if I see something, do I become friendlier to it? And if I see something lots of times, do I become friendlier to it? And it seems like what you're saying is people have a really complicated relationship with stuff that they read about, listen to, watch online. It reminds me a bit of somebody I know in my family. I saw Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young at a free concert years ago and heard the song for the first time, "For Dead in Ohio." I was moved by it and thought, wow, I've never heard this song. And I went and looked it up and had seen some of the violence that it was referencing. And this protest anthem and so forth. And I asked my folks and was like, what did y'all think of this song when you were younger? And they were like, I just love the song. I was like, well, you didn't respond to the message? And they were like, what message? They just really liked the tune. They weren't scrutinizing the lyrics. So they had a more complicated set of relationships with this text, which I thought was interesting.
So there's no evidence that people were more rational in the past or less conspiratorial or whatever. And this belies an interesting point, that is, there are all sorts of religious beliefs out there that make a lot of factual claims that just cannot be supported with empirical evidence, right? So people believing in things that involve the dead coming back to life, the existence of heavens, hells, gods, devils, demons, you name it. All of those beliefs are out there. In addition to healing crystals and chakras and auras and all sorts of stuff that people have believed long before the internet. And this is the thing for the last 8 years. In this post-truth world, we've only been focusing on things called conspiracy theories and misinformation or disinformation. But there's all sorts of stuff out there that nobody, journalists in particular, don't want to touch, because everyone's got their own little black box of little pet beliefs that they don't want to touch. They don't want to have scrutinized. And that's why we've never gotten to a point where anyone says, well, here's a general rule of what we should and shouldn't believe. Because most people don't want to subject their personal beliefs, their little pet beliefs, to any sort of general rule, because they won't survive it, right? And I think that's a major problem. So it's just sort of weird to go around and saying, especially when you have the elephant in the room, which is religion, that drives people's votes, probably more so than belief in any particular conspiracy theory, right? But no one's going after the veracity of Christianity or Judaism or Islam or whatever to say, let's fact check that, And it's not like PolitiFact or any of these other places are doing that. But those things are probably a lot more influential in the public square than any particular conspiracy theory.
Joe Uscinski, thank you so much for being on When We Disagree. When We Disagree is recorded at the College of Charleston with creator and host Michael Lee. Recording and sound engineering by Jesse Kunz and Lance Laidlaw. Reach out to us at whenwedisagree@gmail.com.